Okay, so let's unpack this. For a long time, we've been analyzing the tech of AI, but today's deep dive is about a pretty radical argument. Who should actually own AI inside a company? The source material we have argues we need to rip ownership out of IT and hand the reins completely over to finance.
That is the core thesis. And it's because right now, AI is too often treated like a technology
Sort
adventure.
of technology adventure.
Yeah, innovation pilots, vendors promising the world, IT just trying to handle the deployment. But the reality is that sophisticated AI models, they are subtly underwriting business strategy. They're shifting risk. And they could be putting millions of dollars in liability right onto the balance sheet. So it's fundamentally a governance and financial challenge.
So the chief financial officer, the CFO, becomes the main architect for AI accountability. But why the CFO? Isn't this just, a new version of shadow IT? Why put a layer of financial bureaucracy on something the CIO is already struggling with?
Well, because AI breaks the pattern of traditional IT governance. It's an entanglement. It's not like a piece of software that sits neatly in one system. AI is showing up inside your core platforms, your ERP, your CRM, and it's making real-time decisions
Decisions on what?
on
Excel.
pricing, on credit, on fraud detection, even workforce planning. It is directly entangled with financial flows. And IT governance structures were just never, ever designed to manage that kind of enterprise-wide financial risk.
That complexity leads right into what the source calls the cost paradox. It sounds like the ultimate example of something that's easy to start but almost impossible to finish properly.
Precisely. Starting is cheap. You can spin up a cloud model, AI as service, no problem. But it gets monumentally expensive when you try to scale it
Why?
because of escalating consumption fees, these incredibly complex data pipelines, and all the mandatory extra controls you need for security and regulatory compliance.
So the cost structure itself is actually creating a governance vacuum.
It is. And this lack of discipline leads to dozens of scattered tools, really unclear benefits, and what the source calls silent risk. If you really look at the numbers, companies are investing a ton, but a tiny minority report clear, measurable financial returns. That gap right there between the huge spend and the hazy impact, that's a governance failure. And it's a failure that really only the CFO, coming from a purely financial perspective, can fix.
Right. And putting the CFO in charge, it changes the entire conversation. Instantly, you move away from what cool things can this model do to much more disciplined financial questions.
Exactly. And that financial discipline really follows three core principles. First, AI has to be treated as a portfolio of financial bets,
Not experiments.
not experiments. Every single use case needs a defined business case, a measurable value hypothesis, and a very clear payback horizon.
Okay, that makes perfect sense from a capital allocation standpoint. So what's the second principle? Risk integration. Why is the CFO in the best spot to handle the really specialized risks of AI, like model risk?
Because those risks are, at their core, financial liabilities. Model risk, where the model just gets the forecast wrong, that could expose the company to huge credit losses or, bad pricing strategies. Then there's conduct risk, where the model hallucinates or breaks privacy rules. That opens you up to massive regulatory fines and brand damage. The CFO already oversees the enterprise risk framework for things like this. AI risk has to plug directly into that existing structure.
And the third principle is performance discipline. So just strictly monitoring ongoing costs, benefits, and unintended consequences. Let's use the specific example from the source. A marketing team wants a generative model for campaign personalization.
The CFO's governance lens immediately focuses on accountability. They don't just ask, does the technology work? They ask different questions. They ask, how are we measuring the incremental revenue from this personalization? Specifically, what's our maximum downside if the model introduces bias or violates data privacy? And if that financial return can't be clearly measured against the total cost and risk, well, a project doesn't deploy. Simple as that.
It sounds incredibly demanding, but also very strategic. So what does this shift mean for leadership as a whole?
It creates a single undeniable point of accountability for boards, for regulators, for shareholders. Making the CFO the AI governor sends a really powerful message that AI is core to the business model, not just some IT infrastructure. It forces a much-needed partnership between finance, technology, risk, and the business units themselves.
We have to avoid AI theater, as the source puts it. That's where the appearance of innovation replaces any actual measured value.
And that's the provocative takeaway. The argument is that AI won't fail because the tech is weak. It will fail because governance is weak. Which really raises an important question for you, the listener. The organization that thrives will be the one where the CFO is not a spectator, but AI's most demanding, disciplined, and strategic owner, demanding clarity on where AI touches the numbers, where it shifts risk, and how it is held to account. So what assumptions about AI ownership does your organization need to challenge today?